Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is 𝗘𝗵𝗿𝗶𝗴, and it's my privilege to welcome you to today's panel discussion on Powering Africa, Electrifying the Continent Through Sustainable Energy Solutions. As your moderator for this session, I'm excited to facilitate a dynamic and insightful conversation among our esteemed panelists with a background in the energy, specifically the power sector. I'm committed to ensuring that today's discussion is engaging, informative, and thought-provoking. Together, let's delve into the intricacies of our topic and explore diverse perspectives to glean valuable insights. Thank you for joining us once again. Before I introduce my panel members, I'd like to apologize for the change in panel. So I'll give the opportunity to my panel members to introduce themselves. William, Richard, and Chimdi, please go ahead.
Thank you, Yorm. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. My name is William Brent. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Husk Power Systems. We are a company that's been around for 15 years. We focused on rural electrification in Africa and South Asia. And we do that through building mini grids, selling and financing appliances for rural customers, building rural C&I for rooftop solar, and also energy services, including e-mobility and agro-processing. Great to be here. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is 𝗘𝗵𝗿𝗶𝗴. Hi, everyone. My name is 𝗘𝗵𝗿𝗶𝗴, and I currently work as an energy access consultant, currently supporting the West Africa Energy Program, and that is being implemented by Deloitte. Currently support West Africa. I'm looking in West Africa, and my work is basically focused on providing technical assistance to private sector companies in relation to technology, mini grid, solar home system, productive use of energy solution within the West African region. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is 𝗘𝗹𝗲𝗿𝗶𝗿. I'm a senior energy consultant with 𝗬𝗏𝒑. I also work as a consultant with UK and I have a background in energy, and I was part of a team that did the privatization in the Nigerian power space. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, my esteemed panel members. So before we speak about the primary challenges hindering electrification in Africa, I'd like to give a brief background, and then we'll delve right into the questions. So as it stands now, Africa stands at a pivotal moment in its energy trajectory, with electrification efforts being key to unlocking its economic potentials and improving the lives of millions. However, it cannot be understated that there are numerous challenges which persist till date, ranging from infrastructure limitations to policy gaps and financial constraints. Addressing these hurdles requires innovative approaches, robust policies, strategic investment, and collaborative efforts between public and private sector. In this context, it's imperative to explore the multifaceted landscape of Africa's energy sector, delving into challenges, solutions, success stories, and future prospects, which we'll be doing in this discussion today. So now let's delve into these questions to understand the complexities and opportunities surrounding Africa's electrification journeys. So my question to all, what are the primary challenges hindering electrification efforts across Africa, and how can these challenges be addressed to ensure universal access to electricity? So I'll take it William first, followed by Richard in that order, and then Chimdi. Please go ahead.
If it's okay, since I'm the only non-African here, I'd like to do the order with me in the end and hand it over to my African brothers to go first, if that's okay.
That's fine. So I'll take Richard, Chimdi, and then I'll take you, William, after Chimdi.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think being in the sector for some time, and some of these challenges have been sitting with us for quite some time. And I think mostly the primary challenges with respect to electrification effort in Africa mostly has been access to finance. which is the key. And when it comes to access to finance, both from the technological perspective, in terms of access to the technology, affordability, the cost of the technology, and even the upfront cost in investing in the technology. I've been to several rural communities. I've engaged a lot of the private sector. We've been to the field, worked on the field with them to sell their products in the market. And one of the challenges that I mostly see is people's ability to pay initial cost of technology. And these are solar home systems. It's different when it comes to mini-grid deployment that require a lot of huge investment. And if it's not favorable in terms of policy perspective, then it becomes a bit of a challenge. So in terms of policy infrastructure policy-wise, some of the key challenges. Sharing example, in Africa, for example, there are various challenges. Sub-Saharan Africa has its own challenges. Northern Africa has its own challenges. Southern Africa has its own challenges. But majority of these challenges are in line with policy. If the policy are not in the right places and the policy are not properly defined, then it becomes a lot of challenges for investments to arrive in the country. Most investors in mini-grids, if the policy is not right, they will not be interested in investing in the country. So this is one of the key things, that is policy plays a very important role. Yes, financing is a challenge, but sometimes when there's no appropriate policy, then it will not be attractive for private sector investment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard. Chimdi, I'll take your contributions now.
Okay, I agree wholly with Richard on financing, because investments in the power sector require huge costs of initial investment. And I also agree that the legal and regulatory framework is a policy for finance to flow in. Investors want to be sure that there's certainty. There's also uncertainty in the movement of microeconomic indices. So if you take Nigeria as an example, sometime last year, the exchange rate was 365 naira to the dollar. And as we speak, it's 1,200 and something naira to the dollar after hitting 1,900. So there are, however, some ways that I feel that these things can be addressed. So apart from countries in Africa making sure that they create the right legal and regulatory framework, there also has to be certainty. They have to eliminate policy somersaults. They have to do things to create the right investment environment. So I want to give an instance. So there's an agency in Nigeria called InfraCredit. It's part owned by the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority. InfraCredit gives guarantees when people want to go to the market to raise capital. InfraCredit has assisted firms like North-South Power to be able to go to the market by guaranteeing the funds flowing in, and have been able to raise billions of naira to refinance the dollar loans. So when governments create agencies like this that would help the initial capital outlay to be in the local currency, thereby de-risking some of the foreign exchange fluctuations that could happen. That's one of the ways that at least the local market can invest. Then for international investors, government would probably give incentives such as sovereign guarantees, tax holidays, and things like that to ensure that investment flowing. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Over to you, William. We'd like to hear your perspective as well.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so I mean, I think the points made by Richard and Chimdi are spot on. I would add on the policy front that, we get focused on policy, but we also sometimes forget about politics, and that energy can be a highly politicized industry. It often is, in our experience. And political will is also really important, not just the implementation side on the policy and regulatory front. And that political will can change with administrations. So, that's a risk that we've experienced in some markets in Africa, and it's been a painful lesson for us that we have to pay more attention to that. On the finance front, I would second the fact that local currency debt is really necessary, but local currency debt that's long-term and affordable. I think we need to remember that the terms of the debt need to be acceptable, especially for a young market like the mini-grid industry. We also need equity, at least the mini-grid industry does. We see early stage equity, growth stage equity, but there's a huge gap in the middle that prevents companies, especially local companies, from scaling. A couple other things I'd mention, integration of solutions. I often talk with governments and I see, 4 distinct lanes that people discuss: grid extension, mini grid, solar home systems, and productive uses. But if we take the customer first, which is what we try to do, and to take a more of a people-centric approach, these lanes really need to merge, and we need to look at it from the perspective of what best serves the customer. And oftentimes it's not one or the other; it's a combination of those 4 things. Speed of deployment is also a real barrier for growth for the industry. Current rate of projects is far too slow for us to achieve universal electrification by 2030. I think governments need to really streamline permitting, have single window and batch approvals, funders, who we deal with, unfortunately, much more than we would like. Need to pool capital that's blended, but also take more risk and learn how to move faster. And then the last thing I would say, and maybe it's the most important, is the people is a barrier. I mean, there's really hard. It's very competitive market for the best talent in Africa, and that's especially and also bringing more women into the industry is a challenge as well. So I think what can we do to improve the talent pool, make it more diverse, is also something that I think is an important aspect.
All right, thank you very much, William. So Richard, I would like to come back to you. In your submission earlier, you mentioned that even though it's an African problem, the various problems differ region to region in Africa. So you mentioned that the problems in Northern Africa may not be similar to that in Eastern Africa, Southern Africa, and Western Africa as well. So my question is, in what ways can innovative and sustainable energy solutions be tailored to suit the diverse needs and conditions of the different regions within Africa?
Thank you very much, Yom, for that. And I think that market intelligence is very important. And being able to have access to the right data helps you to address some of the challenges separately. And when you look at Sub-Saharan Africa is the least electrified within Africa. And when you look at countries like Chad, Niger, Burkina Faso, those countries are the least electrified. And most issues within these places has to do with policy, has to do with finance, the people's ability to pay. So these are some of the challenges. And in Sub-Saharan Africa, when opportunities in terms of financing projects, development partners implementing initiatives need not to focus within the whole of Sub-Saharan Africa, but it should be country specifics. Because I'm just giving an example where we have Eastern Central Africa and we have Western Africa. There's been a lot of instances where there are funding opportunity where funding mostly goes to East Africa because most of the players are there. They are well experienced when it comes to applying for proposals to access funding. And when it comes to some companies in Western Africa, some of the local companies are not able to access. So I think when it comes to in terms of initiative, development support, financing for the sector, I think it should be country specific. For example, now Roger is started doing some work, and it's calling on companies, especially country companies, to apply. And if that is successful, we expect at least 2 to 3 companies or 4 companies to be funded, local companies, be funded in country to be able to address some of these challenges. The other aspect is that there have been instances whereby I've had meetings with regulators to find out how do they assess energy assets in terms of for solar home systems. And when you look at it, most policy implementers say that they don't count solar home systems. It's only mini-grid, because solar home systems is a short term, but a lot of the companies are doing a lot in terms of going to rural communities, selling some of this production. And if it's not counted, it means that there's a lot of effort that is being put in, but some of these technologies are not counted as part of the energy assets computation. So I think we need to look at innovation in terms of the technology, in terms of counting the solutions. We need to look at, for sub-Saharan Africa, mini-grid solar home systems that will work, because our energy access rate is very low. For Northern Africa, mostly have almost like 100% energy access, and most of their challenges have to do with transmission. So there's a lot of investment that is needed to go into transmission, making sure that there's no power theft and all that. That is how this can be addressed. Eastern and Central Africa also has similar challenges in terms of energy assets. So a lot of effort is being going into access to finance, looking at affordability, introducing pay-as-you-go technology solutions, so that customers that do not have enough can be able to afford some of this technology. And for solar home systems, there are a lot of technology solutions. The other innovation that I would like to touch on is the introduction of GIS technology for the companies to know where to go. Because the problem is that we have information on, there's no energy, the energy access rate is about, let's say, 80%, 40%, 20%. But where can the companies go to be able to provide some of these solutions to some of these communities? So there's a lot to be done in terms of those technology solutions, yes.
All right, Richard, I hear you very clearly. You are talking about the importance of market intelligence, and I think it's really, really necessary that we take that into consideration moving forward, because we need the market data research, focus, and analysis to be able to know where to put our investments, right? And then, yes, thank you very much. I'd like to say thank you so much to the people joining us today, and thanks for your questions. We'll address them at the end of the session. Please keep your questions coming. Now, Chimdi, I want to move over to you. I remember when you were speaking earlier, you mentioned that we needed to put in the legal and regulatory framework. And you also mentioned some economic factors that must be certain to attract investments. I want to ask you, how do policy measures and investment strategies play a pivotal role in accelerating the pace of electrification across Africa? And what are some examples of successful implementation? I remember you mentioned some bodies in Nigeria. Can you give us more examples of some successful implementations you've seen in your country and across Africa as well?
Okay, thank you, Yon. So indeed, policy measures and investment strategies are really critical in accelerating the pace of electrification. Some of the things that need to be done, for instance, is that African countries need to implement an integrated resource plan. The result of this plan would point to where investments should go, as well as reveal the least cost options of those investments When these things come out, it would first of all show that the countries are ready to do business, and they will inform creation of adequate investment-friendly policies, which the countries are supposed to come up with. And the integrated resource plan would also tell investors where their finances are supposed to flow. Carefully thought out policies and strategies to attract investments actually do work. Like I earlier mentioned, I was part of the privatization process in Nigeria. And in the case of the power sector privatization, the Bureau of Public Enterprises, which was the agency that I was with them, came up with some strategies to give investors confidence. One of them was the creation of a government agency for the bulk purchase of electricity. So if investors were going to come in and they didn't know if they bought a generation plant, they wanted assurance that the energy they generated and the investment would be recouped. So we came up with the strategy of creating the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading PLC, which would buy up all the power generated from these privatized companies. This was to assure the investors that their power was going to be purchased. Another example in the same transaction was the addition of put-call option clauses in the contract, as well as including adequate termination clauses and force majeure events. These things are not just for privatization contracts, but even, for instance, when you look at new independent power plants coming up, when they enter into contracts with the government that assures them that their investment will be recouped, they have confidence to invest. Government should also give sovereign guarantees in some cases, and they could do this in partnership with multilateral development agencies like the World Bank. So the other ideas or things that government can do, such as to reduce financial risks, policy measures such as the guarantees I earlier mentioned, creating subsidies which must be funded in the national budget, and risk-sharing mechanisms that can help mitigate these financial risks. Governments should also look at reforms to liberalize the sectors, because African countries are poor and government cannot continue to be the ones doing the investments and providing subsidies. Nigeria and Tanzania, for instance, carried out reforms and liberalized the energy sector, attracting significant private sector investment and this has led to improvement in access, efficiency, and service delivery. So through these policies, government should promote innovation, ensure social inclusion, just like Richard said, and look towards renewables. Countries like Kenya and South Africa have implemented renewable energy feed-in tariff programs to incentivize investment in renewable energy projects by guaranteeing long-term fixed prices for electricity. So these and a host of other things government can do to ensure that electrification happens.
All right, thank you, Chimdi. It's interesting that you mentioned the private sector involvement in Africa's power supply, and I would like to call on Richard to just expand on that for us now.
Okay, thank you very much. I think in the period the period of being within the renewable energy space, getting to understand what some of the key things that are necessary for private sector involvement. I think the value chain for within the energy sector is basically beginning to understand and appreciate the value chain of the energy sector. Then we will understand that one, private sector can play a very good role in terms of innovative technology solutions. So now we have a lot of company manufacturing amazing technology, appliances, productive use of energy solution. That was last year under the USA-funded program, 𝗘𝗹𝗲𝗿𝗶 program. We did the first pilot of various technology solutions. They included milling solution for productive use. We also did solar generators for SMEs. So when it comes to the manufacturing aspect, private sector can look into manufacturing various technology, doing enough research, providing those technologies to the market, forming strategic partnership with distributors of those technologies. And also, one of the key things that I think would also look into providing innovative technology solutions. So now we have companies like FieldPro, Angaza, all those platforms providing technology solutions that help off-grid companies access route to market. Those technologies are very important. I'm talking from the business perspective in terms of off-grid companies selling product to the market. In terms of mini grids, I think there are varying policies across Africa. In some countries, government is leading the innovation of ensuring that mini grid is happening. But there's a lot to do when it comes to private sector involvement, developing EPCs, coming up with innovative solutions on productive use of energy that will perform well on mini grids. Those things are very important because for Ghana, let me give Ghana, for example, policy saying that government is responsible for deploying mini grids. Government's responsibility is to engage private sector to deploy the mini grid at EPC. But I've done research and I realized that what can be more important for the private sector is to come up with technology solutions, like refrigeration solutions, mailing solutions, developing productive use of energy centers that would help increase utilizations of those mini grid solutions that have been deployed. So those things are very important. And I'm also looking at capacity development. The private sector can do a lot by providing training, supporting training women to build capacity of women to be more integrated into the energy space, and helping the institutions like the private sector and government sector institutions to better understand all these technology solutions. Those are very important for private sector involvement because based on experience, I know that private sector is doing very well when it comes to energy deployment and introducing productive use of energy solutions onto that. But it's different from the government sector. The government responsibility is to ensure that everybody is electrified. But private sector is responsible to ensure that they provide solutions to some of these communities, and these communities at reasonable cost as well. And I think there's more to be done in terms of ensuring that we are development organizations are supporting government institutions to understand the essence of private sector involvement in the energy space. Because when it comes to transmission, distribution, generation, energy efficiency, demand management, private institutions are institutions that are providing the right technology for government to be able to provide energy access to its country.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Richard. So the talk about private sector and then mini grids, I would like to ask William to tell us the role of decentralized power solutions and integrated generation, transmission and distribution projects. What role do they play in Africa's quest for sufficient base load power and electrification of rural and off-grid communities? William, in your response, can you also give us some of HASC-Power success stories and best practices in the implementation of sustainable off-grid energy solutions across the continent? I know the question is loaded, but then you can just speak about the decentralized power solutions, and then you tell us your success stories as well.
Okay, and I'll try and be as fast as I possible. But I also want to just comment one response to Richard on data. I think, as a company that's looking to expand in Africa right now, data is a huge barrier for us at this point. You can get national level data. It's not great, but national level data doesn't actually tell the story, because often the countries that we go into, they're regions within the country. Some are absolutely ready for our investment, some are definitely not. So if you try and analyze at the national level, you don't actually get to an answer for which country makes the most sense for our business model. So it's national data needs to improve, but also that you have to take a lens that goes to the subnational level. And then, 𝗬𝗲𝗏, just a question for you. I don't know if we'll have time today, but is a sovereign guarantee possible for companies like us as well, that reduce the risk of governments, coming in from the one where we might have gotten a concession or, had a partnership? Is there some opportunity for a sovereign guarantee as well that extends beyond changes of government? In terms of the role of decentralized and mini grids, I mean, I'll quote the World Bank. They say that the mini grids have the ability or should the least cost opportunity to power 380 million people in Africa. And that will require the construction of 160,000 mini grids. Now, whether you think that number is inflated or not, the fact remains that you're going to need billions of dollars to, even if it's to build 50,000 mini grids or 100,000 mini grids, you need a huge amount of money. And not also, don't forget that we're also building the transmission and distribution networks, which is a huge bottleneck in Africa as well. So that's taking off of the financial burden of government, putting on the back of the private sector, both for generation and transmission and distribution. So the opportunity and the need is enormous. And I think, in the question of baseload power, I've seen some of the questions in the chat. Mini grids are very different from solar home systems. Those are consumer finance products, typically for 3 to 5 years. Mini grids are energy infrastructure. We're in the communities that we serve for at least 20 to 25 years. And these mini grids are able to provide modern electricity. These are modern levels of electricity. If you look at the World Bank tiering system, tier 5 is 24/7 basically power. Mini grids can provide 24/7 power. They can also provide power to SMEs, right? We have 15,000 SME customers that we serve. So it's very different model than the solar home system approach. And it can provide, essentially the building blocks for the rural economy, whether that's agro processing, cold chain, transportation. We're doing e-mobility pilots right now in Africa. So, the opportunity just beyond the provision of electricity is, I think, underappreciated, as well as that transmission aspect as well. And then on the, just also touch on the public-private partnership in Nigeria. We're working with the state level distribution companies there to do what are called interconnected mini grids. And these are bringing together discos, private sector mini grid players, and the communities that would be served. It's a tripartite arrangement. And I think that this is also a very interesting model that deserves more exploration. It's happening in Nigeria. Other governments are starting to look at it. People talk about, well, what happens to the mini grid asset when the grid arrives? Well, yes, we haven't experienced that yet, and we're not sure when it will happen. What I find interesting in the Nigeria example is that instead of the grid extending to us, we're extending back into the grid, right, through these interconnected mini grids. And so I think there's a shift in mindset that's required that looks at how we can best combine these solutions, as I mentioned in the beginning, where we merge different solutions to take the customer first and provide them with the best service possible. In terms of HUSC, I'll maybe mention a couple of things that have been key success factors for us. We've been very hyper-focused on levelized cost of energy. So the OpEx and CapEx costs taken over the life of the asset. We're under 27 cents per kilowatt hour now. We hope to get that down to 20 cents. That takes us into the range where we're really competitive with any solution on the market today. I think the other success that we've been able to achieve is on the demand side. So we learned early on that just by providing electricity, you can't build a viable business model, but you also can't satisfy what the customer wants. You really need to take a hard look at what are the demand side activities that you have to implement in order to improve the capacity utilization of your mini grid, so benefiting our business, but more importantly, helping the customer build their livelihoods and their businesses, right? Whether that's agriculture related or, water or transportation. We've focused heavily on looking at demand side, and that includes appliance sales and financing, both for households and for commercial customers. So not only are we committed to providing the electricity, but giving our customers the means to use that electricity. It's a win-win. They benefit, we benefit, and if we can continue to scale that, right now it's still early stages, if we can scale those demand side activities, I think the potential is enormous. Thanks.
Thank you so much, William. There are some follow-up questions for you in the Q&A box, which we'll be getting to shortly. So I'll take the questions in the Q&A box. Before I get to our concluding remarks, so let me just follow up from what you said, William, so we can just answer these questions quickly. There's a question here that says, what's the average size capacity of mini grids considered here when the World Bank is talking about 160,000 mini grids?
I don't know what the mini grid, the sizing is according to the World Bank. I can just tell you what HUSC Power is looking at, and it's very market dependent and community dependent. So it can vary within the country, it can vary, within communities. In Nigeria, we typically start at around 50 kilowatt solar plus batteries. If you look at markets like the Democratic Republic of Congo, I would imagine that system sizes will start at, anywhere between 100 and 500 kilowatt. Other countries might be smaller than that, as low as 30. So it really depends on where you're building these mini grids, but I think at the end of the day, it ties back somewhat to what the demand profile is of the community, right? Whatever that community can sustain in terms of capacity, we can build, just because we build our systems in a modular fashion. They're standardized, they're designed to be built. So if we build a 50 kilowatt mini grid, we can add on top of that another 50 kilowatt, and again another 50 kilowatt, and grow modular. So yeah, the answer is it really depends on the country, I would say.
All right, thank you, William. Yeah, William, there's a question here asking if you're implying that more data centers are needed across Africa.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Do we need more data centers across Africa?
Data centers? Oh,
Yes.
I think I'm not a data center guy, but the digital economy in Africa is taking off. Absolutely, the continent needs more data centers, and they need to be powered with renewable energy, and should be powered with renewable energy.
All right, thank you, William. So now I'll move to Richard. There are a few questions for you here. There's a question from John Clark who says, per your comments on new technology, would Nigeria infra credit be willing to consider new GW level technology? I think that question should be for Chimdi. But Richard, you could go ahead if you have something to add.
I think Chimdi will be best fit to answer those questions. Yeah.
So Chimdi, the question here is, new technology, per your comments on new technology, would Nigeria infra credits be willing to consider new GW level technology?
So if the project is packaged well, they will consider it, because that's what they're created for, and they're there to do business. So once the project is well and properly packaged, they will consider.
All right, thank you. Chinde, I'm going to hold you right there again. There's a question here from Antoinette Salah, who is asking, in the integrated resource plan, is there a plan for the most vulnerable communities also to have access to affordable energy to enable them to improve their livelihoods?
So definitely there is a plan. Like when you're doing the IRP, you're looking at where there's access, where there isn't access, and where you need to take access to, and you're considering what technologies would best serve there. But also, as a policy, as government must create policies that look at those who cannot afford to pay cost-reflective tariffs. So for instance, in Nigeria, we have something we call the cross-subsidy, where industrial customers or commercial customers pay slightly higher, and there is a cap on what the lower-end customers pay. So it's a policy thing, but the IRP plans for renewables and plans for the least cost measures to take power to each location.
All right, so is there a type of energy investor, is there a type solar, thermal, wind, etc. of energy investors are interested in terms of return in their investments? Maybe Chimdi can speak for Nigeria and Richard will speak for Ghana, and then William will speak for Africa in general.
Okay, but could you ask the question again?
Is there a type, so either solar, thermal, wind, etc. of energy investors are interested in terms of returns in their investments? So they want to know what type of, we are talking about renewables here. Is there a particular type that investors are interested in terms of returns on their investments?
The answer to that question is in the figures. When you run the numbers, when you look at the cost of your project, you look at the cost of financing it, and you look at the potential returns. So in some places, solar would work. Maybe they have many more sun hours. In other places, they have access to rivers or wind, and hydro or wind technology would work better. But I think ultimately your financial model would give you guidance on what and where to invest.
All right, thank you. Richard, what are your thoughts?
Well, in terms of the technology, I think what best addresses what is more feasible for investor is dependent on what has been studied on based on the country specific. So in certain countries, solar energy makes sense. In sub-Saharan Africa, renewable energy such as solar, that is solar, makes a lot of sense. In Ghana, solar makes a lot of sense. But a lot of research are being ongoing, like hydro, thermal, biogas, and any related technology. So it depends on the country specifics and what makes sense to the investor. If there is limited research and on a particular technology in country, it means that investors may not want to invest into it because there's limited feasibility study on that particular technology in the specific country that they expect investments in. Yeah.
All right, thank you. William, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think, it also depends on the type of investor, right? I mean, there are different types of investors. I would say it depends on the investor. If it's patient capital, sort of impact investor, their expectations on return is very different from a commercial investor. At the same time, expectations on returns are going to differ for utility scale projects versus mini grids versus solar home systems. So it's all, I mean, you can come up with a lot of different answers on there depending on how you define the issue. I mean, we raised $100 million in equity and debt in October of last year. And so we've been talking to investors a lot. And I could tell you that, you know, they wanted to see a double-digit IRR, an internal rate of return, for them to invest in our company. We were also EBITDA positive at that point. So, you know, I think, again, it depends on the type of company that you're investing in, what the type of investor is. But, you know, that's the one experience that I can talk to specifically.
All right, thank you. There's a question here from John Clark. He said Chimdi mentioned a firm that guarantees projects, and he wants to know then, please advise on this entity. I remember he mentioned the guarantee provider in Nigeria is InfraCredit. I don't know what kind of advice Chimdi can give on the entity. But Chimdi, do you like to go and take a go at this?
Okay, yes, it's InfraCredit. I think William had replied that on the chat. I don't think there's enough time to go into the details, but it's InfraCredit, and I think there's substantial information on their website.
All right, thank you. For all the audience who want the contact information of our panel members, you can please add them on LinkedIn. And I think if you get in touch with the ECP team, you could get their email addresses as well. Thank you. I don't think we'll be able to go through all the questions now. I'd like to take the concluding remarks for my panel members, right? In just 2 to 3 minutes each. So I want to know, as we look ahead to the Invest in Africa Energy Forum in Paris, how can forums like these facilitate greater collaboration and investment in Africa's most transformative energy projects, ultimately driving sustainable development and economic growth? So I'll just take it in the order that as you guys appear on my screen. So, okay, I was going to mention William first. I'll go with Chimdi, then Richard, and William.
Okay, could you ask the question again? Sorry.
My question is, as we look ahead to the Invest in Africa Energy Forum in Paris, how can forums like these facilitate greater collaboration and investment in Africa's most transformative energy projects, ultimately driving sustainable development and economic growth?
Okay, so forums like this actually bring investors and opportunities together. And something that has been lacking in Africa is actually well-packaged projects. So you have to think your projects through, think on de-risking them. Like Richard and William mentioned, data is critical. So your source of information, the information that you're providing is very, very essential. So from forums like that, several deals have been closed, and I'm looking forward to this one in particular. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Richard?
Okay, sorry. So I think forums like this are very important because it brings sector leaders together to address key issues related to the energy sector. And giving scenarios like organizations like Beyond the Grid for Africa, what they are implementing currently by bringing and undertaking such initiative where they bring the sector together, various players together. This forum presents an opportunity to have something going by bringing various players, being it investors, technology providers, government together to address some of the challenges. Because if government is able to address certain issues related to policy, then we can have more investment in Africa, in certain countries in Africa, because we still have issues with energy access. We still need investment in the country. So dialogues like this are necessary. It shouldn't be just after the talks, then nothing happens. There should be action after the talks. So after the talks, there's a need for continuities of engagement so that we can have more investments and more support from development partners that see opportunity to invest in Africa. Yes. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, William.
Yes, so I would say, these forums are quite important in bringing together the sector. One of the things that I've often believed and still haven't really seen enough of, in my opinion anyway, is intersectoral collaboration. So when you talk about sub-Saharan Africa, it's where agriculture accounts for probably 50 to 70% of the livelihoods on the continent, and has a huge energy need. Right? How do we bring together other sectors adjacent to energy into these types of conversations so that we can break down silos that still exist between the different sectors? That would include transportation as well, in terms of e-mobility and what the opportunities are. So how do you take it to the next level, right? And also how do you facilitate more pooled resource? I think partnership is one of those things that often gets spoken about, but it's mostly lip service. There's a lot of funding windows out there that companies like mine, like Husk Power, need to sort through in order to access the capital that's available. How do you try and consolidate? How do you get the development finance institutions and other funders to consolidate that funding so that instead of having to knock on 100 doors, we can knock on 10? And improve the efficiency with which they're deploying their capital and we are able to raise capital. I think that's also something that I would love to see more of. So cross-sectoral, but also inter-energy sector, greater collaboration between funders. And also I think there's a huge learning opportunity among governments. I mean, I'm in Zambia today. I'm going to DRC tomorrow. And I'm seeing that there is just a huge amount of work, for example, is being done in Nigeria that nobody knows about here, right? How do we make sure that learning is also shared so that people don't have to reinvent the wheel every time? I think that's something that also these types of convenings could be very helpful at.
Thank you. I actually believe that forums like the Invest in Africa Energy Forum, they provide critical forums for collaboration and investments, which is in the end is going to pave the way for a brighter, more electrified future for Africa and its people. So I agree. I'd just like to take a concluding remark before we end the webinar for today. I just want to say thank you to my esteemed panel members. Thank you to Chimdi for bringing the investment perspective. To you, William, for discussing decentralization and power solutions with us. And then to you, Richard, for bringing on board the private sector involvement in Africa's power supply chain. I really appreciate that. And I'd like to say thank you to our audience for being with us from the beginning till the end. And I'd like to conclude that, yes, indeed, Africa's electrification journey is a multifaceted journey, endeavor that demands collaborative action and innovative solutions, which we've talked about today. So it is not, we can't understate the fact that these challenges loom large. We have identified infrastructural gaps and policy barriers, and certain economic barriers as well. The continent actually holds immense potential for transformative change. And I think these conversations must go on. So as stakeholders converge in Paris and beyond, let's seize this opportunity to catalyze change and unleash Africa's energy potential for the benefit of all. Thank you so much, everyone. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.